Unbelievable. Oliver solves the hardest math challenge. What would happen if the boy who was always ignored by everyone proved to be the greatest genius that school had ever seen? This is the story of Oliver, a young man who lived in the shadow of everyone else until the day he decided to show who he really was. The classroom at Ravenwood High School was buzzing that Friday. The teenagers' chatter filled the room, while Professor Carter tried in vain to calm them down. Amid the chaos, a skinny 16-year-old boy sitting in the last row went unnoticed. Oliver Henderson kept his eyes fixed on the window, as if the world outside was infinitely more interesting than the laughter and conversations around him. "Hey, look at the weirdo daydreaming again," whispered Ethan, the basketball team captain, to his group of friends. The laughter was not at all discreet. Oliver was already used to it. 3 years at that school, and he remained the weirdo, the invisible one, the strange one. So many nicknames and not a single friend. Professor Carter slammed her hand on the desk, finally getting the class's attention. Her eyes sparkled differently today. "I have an important announcement," she said, adjusting her red-framed glasses. "The State University has just launched a challenge for all schools in the region. It's called the Great Ravenwood Problem, a mathematical enigma that not even the best university professors have managed to solve completely." Silence took over the room for a few seconds, quickly replaced by bored sighs and murmurs of disinterest. "The student who manages to solve this problem," she continued, ignoring the reactions, "will earn a full scholarship to the university in any course of their choice." That sparked the class's interest, especially Marcus, the math prodigy who always sat in the first row with a smug smile. For 4 consecutive years, he had been the champion of all mathematics Olympiads. "I'll distribute the sheets with the problem," said the teacher. "You'll have 1 week to try to solve it." As the papers passed from hand to hand, Oliver continued looking out the window. When he finally received his copy, he folded it without even looking and placed it inside his worn-out notebook. What nobody knew, nor could imagine, was that Oliver was hiding a secret that was about to change everything. A secret that would make that entire school stop to witness the improbable happen. Life hadn't been kind to Oliver Henderson. In a small apartment on the outskirts of town, he had practically raised himself. His father had abandoned the family when Oliver was just 4 years old, and his mother worked double shifts at the local hospital to keep food on the table. The loneliness had been Oliver's most constant companion. But loneliness also gave birth to something unexpected. With no friends to play with after school, Oliver found solace in books. Not just any books, complex mathematical texts that most adults would struggle to comprehend. By the age of 8, he had taught himself algebra. By 12, calculus. Now, at 16, he had ventured into mathematical territories that even his teachers couldn't navigate. Yet, at school, none of this mattered. Oliver was just the quiet, awkward kid who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation. His silence was mistaken for stupidity, his solitude interpreted as social ineptitude. "I bet even the janitor's mop has a better chance of solving that problem than Oliver," snickered Ethan the next day as their math class began. The comment rippled through the classroom, causing eruptions of barely contained laughter. Professor Carter had asked if anyone had made progress on the Ravenwood problem. Marcus predictably raised his hand with theatrical confidence. "I've been working on it, Ms. Carter," he announced. "I think I've identified an approach using specialized logarithmic functions." "Excellent, Marcus," beamed Ms. Carter. Her eyes then scanned the room dismissively. "Anyone else brave enough to tackle this?" Oliver felt something stir inside him. For years, he had kept his abilities hidden, fearing the spotlight, fearing even more rejection. But something about this challenge, about the way everyone automatically assumed he had nothing to offer, awakened a dormant courage. His hand trembled, Slightly as he raised it, the classroom fell silent, then erupted in disbelieving laughter. "Oliver?" Ms. Carter's voice couldn't hide her surprise, tinged with skepticism. "You want to attempt the Ravenwood problem? I think I might have some ideas," he said, his voice barely audible over the continuing snickers. "Did you hear that?" Ethan stage whispered. "The weirdo has ideas." Ms. Carter silenced the class with a stern look, then turned back to Oliver. Her expression was a mixture of pity and mild amusement. "Well, Oliver, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is an extremely complex mathematical problem. Even university professors have struggled with it. Perhaps you should start with something more appropriate for your level." The dismissal was polite but clear. Oliver lowered his hand, his cheeks burning with humiliation. But deep inside, where no one could see, a decision was forming. A decision that would set in motion events no one in that classroom could possibly anticipate. Because what they didn't know was that last night, while the rest of his classmates were scrolling through social media or playing video games, Oliver had already filled 3 notebooks with calculations and theorems related to the Ravenwood problem, and he was closer to the solution than anyone could imagine. But what Oliver would do next was going to change everything, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever doubted, dismissed, or underestimated him. 3 days passed. The excitement about the Ravenwood problem had intensified throughout the school. The mathematics department had set up a special board in the main hallway where students could post their attempts at solving the enigma. Predictably, Marcus's elaborate calculations dominated the largest space on the board, garnering admiring glances from students and faculty alike. Oliver had spent every night working on his solution, filling page after page with intricate mathematical formulas that flowed from his mind like water. On Thursday morning, he arrived at school clutching his worn notebook, its pages dog-eared and covered with pencil marks. Today would be different. Today, he would take a stand. When Oliver approached the board during lunch break, a small crowd had gathered to admire Marcus's latest additions to his solution. "Excuse me," Oliver mumbled, trying to find a small space to post his work. Marcus turned, his expression shifting from annoyance to amusement when he recognized Oliver. "Well, look who it is." The mathematical genius emerges from his cave, Marcus announced loudly, drawing attention from everyone nearby. "Come to learn from real talent, Henderson?" Oliver didn't respond. He simply reached into his backpack for his notebook. Oh my God, he actually thinks he has a solution. Ethan howled, grabbing the attention of more students who began to gather. "Around, this should be good." "Let me see that," Marcus said, snatching Oliver's notebook before he could protest. The pages flipped open, revealing dense mathematical notations that filled every available space. Marcus's smirk faltered momentarily as his eyes scanned the complex equations, but he quickly recovered, his confidence reinforced by years of being the undisputed mathematical king of Ravenwood High. "This is ridiculous," Marcus declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Half of this doesn't even make sense. Did you just copy random symbols from textbooks?" The crowd laughed on cue. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording. "Give it back, please," Oliver said quietly, reaching for his notebook. Marcus held it higher, out of reach. "I think everyone deserves to see the genius at work." He began reading aloud, deliberately mispronouncing mathematical terms and making Oliver's careful work sound like nonsense. Students gathered closer, phones recording, laughter escalating. The humiliation burned through Oliver like acid. In the back of the crowd, Ms. Carter appeared, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" she asked, pushing through the students. "Just reviewing Oliver's solution to the Ravenwood problem," Marcus replied with exaggerated air quotes. "It's quite the creative piece of fiction." Ms. Carter extended her hand, and Marcus reluctantly handed over the notebook. She flipped through a few pages, her brow furrowing. "Oliver," she said finally, her voice carrying that special tone teachers reserve for sensitive situations. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this isn't how we approach serious mathematical problems. These formulas are, well, they're not standard methods. They're not supposed to be standard, Oliver said, finally finding his voice. The Ravenwood problem can't be solved with standard approaches. A few snickers rippled through the crowd. Perhaps, Ms. Carter said carefully, it would be best if you focused on your regular coursework before attempting challenges of this caliber. She handed the notebook back, and Oliver clutched it to his chest, like armor. I'd like to present my solution tomorrow, he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. In class, in front of everyone, the hallway fell silent for a brief moment before erupting in laughter. Are you serious? Marcus asked, incredulous. Ms. Carter hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Oliver, I don't think that's a good... Please. Oliver insisted, his voice steadier now. Just give me 10 minutes tomorrow. Perhaps it was the unusual determination in his typically quiet voice, or maybe it was simply the teacher's duty to encourage student participation. But Ms. Carter finally nodded. Very well. 10 minutes at the beginning of class tomorrow. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan leaned close to Oliver. Bring tissues tomorrow, weirdo. You're going to need them when you crash and burn in front of the whole class. Oliver stood alone, in the hallway, clutching his notebook. The dread of tomorrow's presentation washed over him like a cold wave. But underneath the fear, something else was stirring, something that had been dormant for years. What nobody realized was that tomorrow's presentation wouldn't just change how they saw Oliver. It would challenge everything they thought they knew about mathematics itself. Friday arrived with an unusual buzz in Ms. Carter's mathematics class. Word had spread throughout the school about Oliver's challenge. Students who normally skipped class found reasons to attend, eager to witness what most expected would be a spectacular failure. Oliver arrived early, setting up his materials at the whiteboard. His hands trembled slightly as he arranged his notebooks and placed fresh markers nearby. He had barely slept, going over his solution again and again, checking for errors, rehearsing his explanation. This moment, this single moment, could change everything. Ready for your big humiliation, Marcus whispered as he passed by, taking his seat in the front row. I'll try not to laugh too loudly when you crash and burn. The final bell rang. Ms. Carter entered, surprised to see every seat filled and even students from other classes standing at the back. Well, she said, surveying the unusual attendance, it seems we have quite an audience today. Oliver has requested time to present his approach to the Ravenwood problem. Let's give him our attention. She gestured toward the whiteboard, and Oliver stood. The walk to the front of the class felt impossibly long. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, hear the muffled snickers and whispers. Someone in the back made a theatrical sobbing sound. Another imitated the sound of a bomb dropping, followed by an explosion noise. Oliver faced the class, his heart hammering against his rib cage. For a moment, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Then he remembered all the nights spent alone with his books, all the mathematical beauty he had discovered in solitude, all the complex problems he had solved with no one to witness or celebrate. He turned to the whiteboard and began to write. The first equations appeared on the board. Clean, precise, and immediately more complex than anything Ms. Carter had taught in class. Oliver worked silently, filling the board methodically with a series of mathematical expressions that flowed from one to the next with elegant precision. The snickering gradually subsided. Confusion replaced mockery as students tried and failed to follow Oliver's rapid calculations. Even Marcus leaned forward in his seat, his smug expression giving way to a puzzled frown. After covering the first board, Oliver moved to the second, continuing his solution without hesitation. His handwriting, usually messy in his notebooks, was surprisingly clear and organized on the whiteboard, a testament to how many times he had rehearsed this very moment. 5 minutes into his presentation, the room had fallen completely silent. Ms. Carter had stopped taking notes, her pen frozen mid-sentence as she struggled to follow Oliver's unconventional approach. "This isn't possible," Marcus muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "He's making this up." But the methodical precision of Oliver's work suggested otherwise. He wasn't just writing random symbols, he was constructing a mathematical framework unlike anything they had seen before, yet undeniably consistent and purposeful. At precisely that moment, the classroom door opened. Mr. Hamilton, the head of the mathematics department and a former university professor, stepped in. He had intended to deliver a message to Ms. Carter, but stopped in his tracks when he saw the equations on the board. "What's going on here?" he asked quietly, his eyes scanning the complex mathematical notation covering the whiteboards. "Oliver Henderson is attempting to solve the Ravenwood problem," Ms. Carter explained, her voice betraying her growing uncertainty. Mr. Hamilton moved closer to the board, analyzing the equations with an intensity that silenced the room even further. His eyebrows rose higher with each line he read. "This approach," he muttered almost to himself, "it's using concepts from non-Euclidean geometry and abstract algebra simultaneously." Oliver paused, marker in hand, unsure if he should continue. "Please go on," Mr. Hamilton said, gesturing to the unfinished equation. "I want to see where this leads." Oliver resumed writing, his confidence growing with each symbol. The class watched in stunned silence as Mr. Hamilton began to nod slowly, his initial skepticism transforming into something that looked remarkably like respect. "Ms. Carter," Mr. Hamilton said finally, his voice barely containing his excitement, "we need to call the university mathematics department immediately, and the principal should see this too." What was supposed to be Oliver's moment of humiliation was turning into something entirely different. As Mr. Hamilton hurried out to make his calls, the atmosphere in the classroom shifted palpably, from mockery to confusion to the first tenuous threads of awe. Nobody was laughing anymore, because what they were witnessing wasn't just an unexpected solution to a difficult problem. It was the emergence of a mathematical mind that appeared only once in a generation. Within 20 minutes, the classroom had transformed into an impromptu academic summit. Principal Walters stood at the back, arms folded, watching with a mixture of astonishment and pride. Beside him, Dr. Eleanor Richards and Professor James Whitman from the State University's Mathematics Department had arrived in record time. Summoned by Mr. Hamilton's urgent call, the students, once eagerly anticipating Oliver's humiliation, now sat in stunned silence, witnesses to something they couldn't quite comprehend but instinctively understood was extraordinary. Oliver had filled 4 whiteboards. His solution to the Ravenwood problem unfolded like a mathematical symphony, elegant, innovative, and undeniably brilliant. As he approached the final equations, his earlier nervousness had vanished, replaced by the calm confidence of someone finally in their element. "And this," Oliver said, writing the final derivation with a steady hand, "leads us to the solution of the core paradox in the Ravenwood problem." He turned to face the class, no longer the invisible boy at the back of the room, but a young mathematician commanding attention through the sheer power of his intellect. Professor Whitman stepped forward, adjusting his glasses as he examined the final board. "This is remarkable," he said, his voice weighted with genuine awe. "You've created a bridge between 2 mathematical domains that nobody has successfully connected before." Dr. Richards nodded in agreement. "The approach is completely novel. It's not just solving the problem, it's revolutionizing how we think about this entire class of mathematical challenges." Marcus sat rigidly in his front row seat, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning recognition. The mathematical throne he had occupied for years had just been dramatically upended. Principal Walters cleared his throat. Perhaps Oliver could explain his approach to us in simpler terms, so we can all appreciate what he's achieved here. Oliver nodded, taking a deep breath. The Ravenwood problem has been difficult to solve because everyone approaches it through conventional methods, he began, his voice gaining strength with each word. But I realized the solution required thinking beyond traditional boundaries. For the next 10 minutes, Oliver guided his audience through his solution, translating complex mathematical concepts into accessible analogies. The classroom hung on his every word, not just the university professors and faculty, but his fellow students too, witnessing the transformation of someone they had dismissed for years. In essence, Oliver concluded, the solution was always there, hiding in plain sight. We just needed to look at the problem from a different perspective. The silence that followed was profound. Then, Professor Whitman began to applaud, followed quickly by Dr. Richards, Mr. Hamilton, and finally the entire classroom erupted in applause. Even Ms. Carter, who had doubted Oliver's abilities just days before, was clapping with genuine enthusiasm. "Oliver," Dr. Richards said when the applause finally subsided, "the university would be honored to offer you a full scholarship. But more than that, we'd like to publish your solution in the International Journal of Mathematics. This work deserves recognition far beyond our state." Ethan, who had led the mockery of Oliver for years, sat slack-jawed in his seat. Several students who had laughed at Oliver just hours earlier now looked at him with newfound respect, tinged with shame. Marcus rose from his seat, his expression unreadable. The classroom fell silent as he approached Oliver. For a moment, tension filled the air. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, Marcus extended his hand. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "What you just did, it's beyond anything I could have imagined." Oliver hesitated before accepting the handshake. In that moment, he realized that the greatest victory wasn't solving the problem. It was earning respect on his own terms through his own unique gifts. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, nobody moved. The usual rush to leave was replaced by a collective understanding that they had witnessed something they would remember for years to come. Students who had never spoken to Oliver gathered around, asking questions, offering congratulations. Principal Walters made his way to Oliver, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've made Ravenwood High incredibly proud today, Oliver, but I have to ask, why keep your abilities hidden for so long?" The question hung in the air, and for the first time that day, the classroom fell completely silent again, waiting for Oliver's answer. An answer that would reveal not just his mathematical genius, but the depth of his character and the power of his personal journey. Oliver looked around the classroom at the sea of faces now focused on him with genuine interest and respect, the same faces that had barely acknowledged his existence for years. The spotlight he had avoided for so long now illuminated him fully, and he found himself surprisingly comfortable in its glow. "I guess I was afraid," Oliver admitted, his voice soft but clear. "When you're different, when you see the world in ways others don't, it's easier to stay hidden. I watched how people treated others who stood out, and I chose invisibility instead." He glanced at his notebooks, filled with years of solitary discoveries. "But living in the shadows means your light never gets to shine. Today, I finally realized that what makes us different isn't something to hide, it's something to share." Dr. Richards stepped forward, her eyes bright with emotion. "Oliver, the university would be honored to have you join us next fall with a full scholarship, but we'd like to offer something more immediate as well. We're hosting the National Mathematics Conference next month, and we'd like you to present your solution as a keynote speaker." Murmurs of amazement rippled through the classroom. A keynote speaker at a national conference was an honor typically reserved for established professors and researchers, not high school students. That would be incredible, Oliver said, a smile breaking across his face. As the impromptu gathering began to disperse, the transformation in the classroom was palpable. Students who had been Oliver's tormentors now looked at him with new eyes, some with admiration, others with regret. Teachers who had overlooked him now wondered what other hidden talents they might have missed in their classrooms. The following weeks at Ravenwood High became a whirlwind for Oliver. A special assembly was held in his honor. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about his mathematical breakthrough. The bullying stopped, replaced by a new respect that spread throughout the school. But perhaps the most significant change was within Oliver himself. He began to speak up in classes, to share his perspectives, to step fully into the light of his own brilliance. He started a math club for students who, like him, approached problems from unconventional angles. The club quickly became one of the most popular in school, with Oliver patiently mentoring others who had previously felt left out or misunderstood. On the evening of his keynote address at the National Mathematics Conference, Oliver stood at the podium facing an audience of distinguished mathematicians, educators, and students. His mother sat in the front row, tears of pride glistening in her eyes. Beside her sat Mr. Hamilton, Ms. Carter, and surprisingly Marcus, who had become one of Oliver's most dedicated supporters. Mathematics taught me that there are multiple paths to every solution, Oliver began, his voice steady and confident. But life taught me something even more valuable, that we each have our own unique formula for success, one that doesn't always follow the standard equations. He paused, looking out at the faces before him. For years, I allowed others to define my value, to make me feel like I didn't belong. But the truth is, we all have something extraordinary to contribute. Sometimes, the greatest minds are the quietest ones in the room. Sometimes, the most profound solutions come from those who see the world a little differently. As Oliver concluded his presentation to thunderous applause, he realized that his journey had come full circle. The boy, who once hid in the back of the classroom, had found his voice, his confidence, and his place in the world. In the years that followed, Oliver's mathematical contributions would earn him international recognition. He would go on to become one of the youngest professors at the State University, known not just for his brilliant mind, but for his compassion and his dedication to finding and nurturing hidden talent in unexpected places. But he never forgot where his journey began. In a classroom where he had finally found the courage to stand up and show the world who he really was. How many brilliant minds are hiding in plain sight around us right now? How many extraordinary talents remain undiscovered because we're too quick to judge, too blind to see beyond our expectations? Maybe that quiet person in your class, your workplace, or your neighborhood has a universe of brilliant ideas waiting to be shared. Maybe the next world-changing insight will come from someone who has been overlooked and underestimated. What would happen if we all took a moment to look beyond the surface, to encourage rather than dismiss, to listen rather than assume? After all, the greatest human potential often lies in the most unexpected places, just waiting for the courage to shine. What do you think? Could there be an Oliver in your life right now? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the extraordinary potential in every human being.